Yeah, so it's great to have everyone join us on this warm spring afternoon and on a Friday afternoon to boot. Yeah, it's great to see all of you or have all of you join us remotely. This afternoon, Ivan and I, as the title indicates, will summarize results from Ivan's primarily analysis of measurements collected over 10 years after initiation of the Strip Cut Understory Protection trial. So the first item on that may be on the final quiz at the end of this is, what does SCUP mean? Okay, so that is Strip Cut Understory Protection. Okay, so we're talking about what we often refer to as understory protection, and that's probably the term I will use going forward here. So this study was initiated by the Mixedwood Management Association back in 2005 under the leadership of Gita Grover and Willie Fast, with participation from some of you who are participating in today's seminar, and some of our colleagues who have retired from active work in forestry. This is also, just so we don't forget, and I notice Mike's listening in, so we really can't forget this. This is also the public unveiling of MGM 21, which is the latest version of the Mixed Growth Model. We've never publicly shared results from MGM. Since we were actively involved. Again, the royal we, by this I mean Mike Boccolo and Kirk Johnson, with a little bit of contribution from myself. So the latest version of the Mixed Growth Model will be up for us to look at a little today. And it's ideally suited for simulating understory protection because MGM is designed to handle structured stands. Okay, next, please, Ivan. Oh, hey, as almost all of you, I think, are aware, in mixed wood stands, it's pretty common for aspen to reach maturity at age somewhere in the range of age 50 to 80, and then to decline due to stem decay. Well, the spruce even at age 80 are generally not ready for harvest, particularly in a stand that has high densities of aspen from the get-go. Okay, so when spruce are in the understory of these aspen stands, back please, Ivan. Thank you. When spruce are in the understory of these aspen-dominated stands, harvesting the aspen overstory while protecting the understory spruce gives an opportunity to utilize the aspen while it's sound, but leaving the white spruce to grow on to merchantable sizes and to provide potentially higher spruce volumes. It's usually desirable to do an understory protection harvest like this once the aspen are merchantable, and the aspen component of the stand's close to culmination age, and hopefully the white spruce is more than 2.5 meters tall, so that they can stay ahead of the resprouting aspen that can come up, as we'll see in the areas where the spruce are left behind. Okay, and the spruce can also stay above the grass and shrub layers. When spruce are more than 5 meters tall, which is common in these stands, strips of aspen are generally left to serve as a wind buffer. And these buffer strips should be oriented perpendicular to the prevailing spring winds. So here in the pictures, so the two top pictures show aspen stands with understory. The lower picture shows an understory protection block taken looking up the extraction trails with showing what an understory protection block might look like about 10 years after understory protection harvesting. Next, please, Ivan. Sorry, I'm getting crazy noises from my computer. Okay, so in terms of the general layout, understory protection involves a combination of buffer strips, extraction trails, and removal areas that create these strips in the forest. and as I already mentioned, we call this Strip Cut Understory Protection, or just Understory Protection in Alberta. In Quebec and Ontario, they have different terms for this, but we won't, for today's presentation, worry about those terms. They're all similar. It's often referred to in Quebec as partial cutting, which I think is a bit of a misnomer, though it is technically a partial cut. A typical layout is shown in the picture on the right-hand side, taken from the 2014 paper by Gita Grover, Mike Boccolo, and Ken Greenway. So there's an extraction trail labeled. So we're looking at the lower image on this. The upper strip of trees is the pre-harvest stand. The lower strip is post-harvest. So we have a machine corridor or extraction trail that's about 5 to 6 meters wide that provides access for harvesting for the feather buncher to operate, and for the skidders to operate during harvest. There's a removal strip that's 6 to 8 meters wide, shown in that panel in the areas that just have spruce, where the aspen is removed, and possibly some large spruce. And merchantable spruce can be removed at this stage, and with the objective here of releasing the understory spruce while utilizing the aspen. And finally, there's a buffer strip where the aspen is left, usually about 3 meters wide in practice, and as we see in the SCUP trial. Okay, so this is the typical pattern. There's also something called understory avoidance that might be used where the conifer regeneration is patchy and not sufficiently uniform in distribution, where you could do an elaborate layout like this and still have enough spruce left behind. Yeah, so in all cases, you need sufficient aspen left behind to provide wind buffering of the taller spruce in the stand in order to prevent wind throw. Okay, so next, Ivan. Okay, so another option, it is possible to harvest the aspen in adjacent strips so that in between the two machine corridors or extraction trails, we only have a retention area. So in place of leaving a buffer strip down the middle, you can harvest a larger area that could be up to 50 meters across, in which case you'd need a wider buffer of aspen, and you also can see increased risk. You also can run into increased risk of wind throw for the spruce, particularly in the middle, and greater risk if there is substantial aspen blowdown to experience a lot of wind throw. Okay, so I'll now turn it over to Aspen to talk about, or to Ivan, right, to talk about the SCUP trial and the results. Ivan.
Okay, thank you, Phil, and hello, everyone. So I'm going to present the main results from the analysis that we done. So for the SCUP permanent sample plot network was established between 2005 and 2007. In 18 recently harvested SCUP blocks within central Mixedwood natural subregion of Alberta. So sites are located across elevation and climatic gradient, which is typical for central Mixedwood natural subregions, for example, including climate moisture index for ranging from minus 0.4 to 3.3. But also the topography is also typical for with majority of plots on flat terrain on the lower or mid-slope position. And then according to the field-determined ecosite, majority of plots were in ecosite D, which is low bush cranberry, and some are in ecosite E dogwood. And soils assessed on the subset of plots show typical conditions for well-productive boreal mixedwoods with a mesic to subhygric soil moisture regime and medium to rich soil nutrient regime. So, for these SCUP blocks, within each block, 2 or 6 cluster PSP plots were established. and that's total of 92 cluster PSP plots were established in this SCUP trial network. And with the plan is the 5-year remeasurement cycle for all these plots. And the main goal is to quantitatively describe stand development after understory protection harvesting, and to provide information required for growth and yield modeling, actually for calibration and validation of growth and yield models. So for our analysis, main objectives were to analyze spruce response to release, to analyze mortality and ingress of spruce and aspen, and finally to initiate MGM simulations. So here it is presented the general layout of a SCUP plot cluster. So it consists on several subplots, and it covers those main treatment areas after the SCUP harvest, right? So the plot center is in the middle of extraction trail, and then removal plots from both sides were established, and also wind buffer zone. And the plot length is 8 or 16 meters, and it is the same for all these subplots. And saplings plots were also established within each of the treatment areas, and they are 2 meter longs, 2 meter long, and the width of all these subplots, including nested sapling subplots, vary with the width of each SCUP treatment. So that's the block specific. Therefore, the total plot cluster size ranges within some values. In addition to that, 2 types of age plots were established adjacent. First, aspen age plot is adjacent to the buffer in the buffer area, and 2 spruce age plots are adjacent to the removal subplots. So available measurements here. So first measurement was done at the establishment year after the SCUP harvest, and then we have available 5-year remeasurement and 10-year remeasurements. Just would like to make note here that the measurement protocol evolved over time, and then some differences in terms of tagging limit was for different subplots and for different species applied in different measurements. Yeah, and the last change was done, I think 2012, and that was effective on all measurements after including 2013 and later. But in order for our analysis, we found the common tagging limit to overcome those issues. So we found the overcoming limit to make our analysis consistent, and that tagging limit was 7 centimeters in dBH for both deciduous and conifers, and for all both treatments, so buffer and removal areas. And we did the analysis of growth, mortality, and ingress of spruce and aspen trees. And then separate analysis was done on stand density on saplings. And in that case, the tagging limit was lower tagging limit was breast height, and the upper tagging limit was 7 centimeter dBH. But just another thing is that for according to the latest measurements, and that was available for entire data set at 10 years remeasurement, those remeasurements were suitable for initiation of MGM in terms of yield predictions, and that was available for all installations, which was good for this study. So then first results for based on measurements of the age, and So Aspen age was determined, as I mentioned, on those Aspen age plots. And so according to one measurement protocol, it was measured 1 aspen tree per 100 square meter. And according to the second measurement protocol, it was 3 trees per 300 square meters. So there's some basically difference in the sample size there. And then if we take a look at the results, we can see some variability, even some variability within a block. And that might be associated with these differences in sample sizes. However, we use the block level age, and that's we found the range for all these blocks from the youngest was the block about 52 years old, and the range was up to 102 years. That's for the mature aspen trees. Then we use that information together, the top height estimates, and we with the standard procedure with using the gypsy site index curve, and we calculated site index. Again, a little bit of variability, and because this is very big data set, wide range in productivity. We have here, and the site index for aspen was from 17.7 meters at some block, and this particular block is the block south from Grand Prairie, for example, and the range was up to 26 meters site index, and there's a few blocks with high productivity and slightly above 26 meters of aspen site index. Then for the spruce, spruce, we found no remeasured spruce trees at those spruce age plots in order to calculate the post-release site index. So that was not done yet, and in this case, we instead of that used the site index conversion model to calculate that model Aspen to white spruce to calculate spruce site index and to use that in growth predictions. So, and this is the first part of the results and about the spruce response to release. Some studies has already been conducted in those SCUP blocks, and this is here you can see the image of the cross section. In this study, the stem analysis was done, and it nicely shows that diameter growth response, and that happens right in the year following the SCUP harvest. In this case, that was 2005, and that the diameter increment stays on that level after the SCUP harvest, and it's much larger comparing this diameter increment before the release. So in our analysis, we analyze diameter increment and height increment for all trees where we have at least 2 measurements available on target trees. So when we found the remeasured data, we compiled all that at the plot level and at the tree level, as I mentioned, for this analysis, we use the tagging limit of 7 centimeters dBH for all measurements. So the results here on the top left graph for diameter increment, we can see that during the first 5 years, so first observed period, the diameter increment was in a range from 0.44 to 0.47 centimeters per year for both buffer and removal. And we can see that there's not much difference between those two treatments. But what we can see here that after during the next 5 years, we can see increase in diameter. So we can see that response of the spruce and that increase was about, in this case, for at plot level, 25% higher during the next observed period. Yeah, so that's the diameter increment. So in terms of height increment, we found that the delay of the height growth response to the second measurement period. So during the first 5 years, that for both buffer and removal, that was slightly under the 10 centimeters per year. However, during the next 5 years, there's a 3 times increase in height growth, again for both buffer and removal. And the other thing here, what we can say that none of the, we did some mixed modeling, so this is statistical analysis here, and then none of the models tested for each period, and response revealed the significant differences between removal and buffer for spruce growth. So next set of results is for stand density, ingress, and mortality, and this is for us on the left-hand side of the panel for the Aspen, and the right-hand side of the panel for the spruce. So first, we can take a look at stand density for the, yeah, we have a density, ingress, mortality, and mortality rate presented here. And first, for the spruce, for buffer zones, so we can see that there's increase with time. There's increase in stand density at buffer for spruce. And that the reason for that, because the ingress is at buffer for spruce is higher than the mortality, right? And that reflects the overall stand density increase. The opposite trend was for the Aspen. So there's a decline in stand density starting the measurement 1 to measurement 3 at buffer. And again, in this case, ingress was mortality was higher than ingress, and if you check this whole 10-year period here, that mortality was about 3 times higher than the ingress for Aspen in the buffer zones. So in the removal areas, ingress caused an increase for the removals. Ingress caused the increase in a stand density for both species, spruce and the Aspen. And in fact, densities for Aspen are reflected that there was actually Aspen was cut at removal at that's SCUP harvest. And then the ingrowth for spruce was fairly consistent. If you check against spruce removal, ingrowth for spruce at removal are pretty consistent for both periods. However, mortality was higher for spruce during the first 5 years, and there's decrease during the next 5 years. The mortality for spruce. However, mortality for then first ingress for Aspen was, there was almost no ingress for Aspen during the first 5 years, and there's after that next 5 years we found an ingress at removal plot for an Aspen. So and that increase, so ingress for Aspen increased over time. Yes, and for the mortality rate, so the last graphs here, mortality rate was higher for Aspen than for spruce. And the other thing is that while no significant differences in mortality rate between buffer and removal treatment, and that was found for both species. So next results are for the density and ingress of saplings. So, and again, we can see results for Aspen and for spruce. So highest number of saplings were found in removal for Aspen. So highest number in removal, and then in extraction, and then in a buffer. And the during between the measurement 2 and measurement 3, that density of saplings for aspen increase at removal. However, interestingly, it decreases for extraction and decreases for at the buffer areas. So in terms of the ingress, we can see the same trend. The highest ingress was much higher, was rate of ingress was the highest at the removal, then for the extraction, and the lowest was the ingress at the buffer areas. In terms of ingress rate was pretty similar for the both removal and extraction, and it was about 2 times less for the buffer. So for the saplings for spruce, so then we can see that at the buffer stand density stayed approximately the same level during the 5 years, and then slightly decrease over the next 5 years. The opposite trend for the removal. There's an increase, constant increase with time for the removal saplings. And just to make note, the spruce at the extraction trail we found only during at measurement 2, only 1 spruce tree was measured at extraction trail, and I think three spruce trees for the entire data set was found. Then for ingress, so then for the spruce, for similarly to stand density, ingress of spruce was higher in removal area than in other areas, and increased over time, while in the buffer it showed decrease, ingress rate decrease. The growth response of aspen and spruce saplings. So we try to collect all available remeasured saplings used for analysis of the entire increment and height increment. For this part, however, some limitation in the data set was that aspen saplings were not measured at measurement 1, and that we also still have no remeasured spruce found for the extraction trail. And because of that, we have different measurements, especially for spruce. We have different sample size, so these results should be taken with caution. But the main results here, first for aspen, was that between measurement 2 and 3, and this is quite a nice sample size here, but the growth response in terms of diameter increment and height increment was pretty similar for all 3 strata here. So results were pretty close for both diameter and increment. However, for spruce, height increment does appear to be increasing with time since removal, but again, this is quite different sample size, and this interpretation of these results will be taken with caution. So that was the first part about the growth and the density responses at different treatments within the SCUP blocks. Next results we will present yield projections. So, and we use the latest measurements available. So we use the 10-year remeasurement for the initiation of MGM, and we use the entire data set. And here, just as Phil mentioned, it is important to say that we use the latest MGM version for this analysis, and that's MGM 21 version, which I guess soon it will be released and available. So in our predictions, we initiated growth of each plot to the age 20, just to make note that at start age for all strata, we use at start as a start, we use age 0 for all strata, regardless of the starting stand state and the tree age present, which is different at different treatments, right? So that's another input parameter. We use block level site index for Aspen and Spruce, and we set for black spruce, if we have that on present at the plot, we set that at 15 meters. So, and then predictions were generated for both no utilization standard supply and for that 1510 utilization standard supplied. And then also for MGM predictions, we use all those predictions we made with the adjacency light model applied. We also tried and initiated projections with the light without that adjacency light model, but I'm going to present you results with the using the light model in the growth predictions. And then finally, we plot level parameters were calculated using the strata, so separately for each buffer removal and extraction, and then they were summarized at plot level using those strata weights. So first, just some basic results to show what we can expect here in terms of MGM yield projections. And so based so for the buffer, we can see, and this is about stand total volume predictions, and we can see predictions for buffer extraction, removal, and for the weighted to the whole plot. And that main driver here in these predictions were the initial stand conditions, and we can see how that impact results, right? The stand volume culminates earliest, and that the culmination values were highest for the buffer, of course, because it was untreated zone, and then culmination was pushed further, and the culmination values were different for the extraction and removal. And again, those predictions were made with the utilization standard supply and with no utilization standard supply. We also used the SVS graphics to visualize these stand dynamics and to see how those different treatments influence the stand dynamics. And a couple of examples I'm showing here. We can see in the first row the one particular, probably typical block where we can see the mature aspen remained in a buffer, and then we can see the removal dominated by the conifers and the extraction the aspen region at extraction trail. However, the range of stand conditions are found in the data set sometimes, and this is data initialized using data 10 years after the SCUP harvest, actually. And in some plots we are missing the mature aspen component, but in some blocks we have more or less aspen region, or even some part of the stands dominated by aspen already. However, the interesting here, so if we check the predictions up to 100 years further in the future, then we can see that regardless the stand conditions, the stands will dominate by conifers with more or less aspen present in those stands. Here are results again for stand total volume, and here all plots are presented. And I want to show you here actually the range of those stand volume predicted, and we can see that all those treatment areas, we have a range of the stand volumes, and that's again it's based, as I said, based on the primarily from the stand conditions and the time of initiation of this predictions. Especially you can see for how that can have irregular pattern for the some of the buffer plots. Here, however, they generally show general pattern, general trend for at all these all these subplots. So that's the one driver of these predictions. So that's the initial stand state. Here I'm just showing the same results just per block for each block, and these black lines showing the average block level averages. But another driver in these predictions were productivity, actually site index. And we can see now, I pointed earlier that some blocks we have a high site index of about 26 meters, and then we can see that on those blocks we can see those predictions and the high values of the volume in those particular blocks, in this case for extraction or for removal. So on this graph, the block level predictions were shown, and again with the black bolded line showing the overall average for the entire data set. And conifer top height is shown here, deciduous top height. In this case, this is with no utilization standard applied, and for stand MAI and volume was shown with the results using the utilization standards applied. What's interesting here to note is that based again on that start date, which we had mature stands present, then in this case MAI is probably meaningful for culmination age and analysis. And then instead of that, we use volume, and those the volume predictions. So volume predictions we use for our next analysis, and then we analyze the volume predictions for fixed rotation. So in this case, we use a range from 20 to 100 years, and we in steps of 10 years. So at every 10 years, so we generated results for deciduous MAI, coniferous MAI, overall MAI, and the volume, and we break down to deciduous and then coniferous component. And so main results here is if we focused on the volume predictions for the whole stand, we can see increase in both Aspen and coniferous volumes up to sometimes around 60 years. And then after that, for both deciduous and the spruce, it levels off or even decrease for deciduous volume. And so that's probably yeah, some that's the, I guess, important results here. And in terms of the some numbers here, so that merchantable total stand volume at the plot level at that 60 years of MGM predictions, which is actually 70 years after the actual SCUP harvest happened. The volume, total volume for was 273 cubic meters per hectare, while the coniferous volume was 168, and the deciduous volume was 105 cubic meters per hectare. And the last slide I'm showing before I switch back to Phil is some brief comparison between gypsy and MGM. And I would like to acknowledge here that we use the gypsy as well, but we would like to acknowledge that we understand that gypsy was not designed to be applied in these complex multi-level, multi-age stand conditions. However, just we wanted to see how that compares, and what we can see here that the results indicate that both models follow similar growth trend for total volume, despite some limitation in overlap for full sample size. So we can see the strong similarities are evident especially during the first 50 years after the understory protection harvesting, and that after the age of 50, MGM generally predicts a decline in total volume due to the increase in tree mortality with age for large trees in MGM survival functions. So, and then, yeah, I hope Phil will take over this and finish the presentation.
Thank you, Ivan. That's, yeah, I hope everyone took that in. We'll briefly summarize in a few minutes. So so how, comparing this when we don't have comparisons to treatments other than understory protection becomes a little difficult, but in an attempt to do that, I used MGM 20 version 21, this latest version, to project the dynamics of some stands from 25 years after regeneration. So I used some data that we have from the West Bogey long-term study from stands measured at age 25 to come up with some reasonable estimates of densities and heights and DBHs of trees to initialize MGM. So I assumed for these simulations an aspen site index of 23 meters and a spruce site index of 18 meters. Also MGM doesn't have an ingress function. Is one of the reasons for the differences between MGM and gypsy. So in order to deal with that, I assumed a regeneration of about 2,000 aspen stems per hectare, following in both the extraction corridors and the removal areas following understory protection. So grew them forward. Okay, so 5 scenarios: plant spruce, remove aspen. So it's aspen removal with herbicide or aggressive motor manual work to get the aspen down to nothing. Plant spruce, thin the aspen to 1,500 stems per hectare at about age 5, and then plan to clear cut the block at age 9, the entire stand at age 90. Then an understory protection alternative added to that second scenario, where the any merchantable aspen and spruce are removed at age 60, leaving the buffer strip in using the understory protection pattern that was used in the SCUP study. And fourth, plant spruce, do an understory protection harvest at 60, and then a clear cut, or sorry, plant, okay, and then clear cut at age 120. So without the thinning of the aspen, and then finally just plant spruce and let her go till age 90 and do a clear cut. Okay, so probably the first thing to look at for these 5 scenarios are the total volumes, or just to get through it quickly. In terms of aspen volume total, the 5th box from the right-hand side, we see that aspen volume increases going down the scenarios up to the 4th scenario, where we get the largest amount of merchantable aspen volume harvested, the 373 cubic meters per hectare, with that split between the 2 passes, so the understory protection pass providing the highest volume in the final pass, providing just under 90 cubic meters, so a portion of that, the volume. Yeah, and a slight reduction if we had in Aspen total volumes if we had just let the mix stand grow to age 90. Spruce volume behaves in a different pattern, with the highest spruce volume showing up in the complete aspen removal and with a clear cut, removing spruce at age 90, so 328 cubic meters per hectare. Okay, thinning with understory protection is in second place. They're at 252. Understory protection without the thinning gives about 200. Planting spruce and just thinning without understory protection gives 194, and planting spruce, leaving it to grow under the aspen to age 90 gives 94. So we get a progressive decline, more or less, in spruce volumes at harvest with increasing amounts of aspen and duration of aspen competition. So understory protection does increase spruce growth compared to not doing understory protection, as the results from the study show. We get good spruce release. Okay, total MAIs, the very far right column. And you can look at the balance of this table later on the video recording of the presentation. So total MAI is greatest if we just plant the spruce and just let the stand grow, because we're getting the greatest volume of aspen over a shorter time period than we get with the understory protection harvest. So higher aspen MAI, spruce MAI of 1 for a total of 5. Then the other scenarios are slightly below that. Understory protection scenarios, both with and without thinning, give us the third and second best MAIs. So still pretty substantial MAIs for the boreal forest based on these projections. Though assuming this, one of the big reasons for this is we're assuming pretty good stocking of the stands, so no gaps, no holes, good productivity, and of course we're ignoring major issues relating to insects and disease, other than stem, some representation of stem decay in the model. So yeah, and the MAI for this pure spruce scenario is the lowest because we don't have any aspen yields in that situation. So okay, thank you. Next, Ivan, please, and let's skip that because I think we're pretty much out of time. Thank you. So conclusions, quickly. So understory protection overall seems to work quite well. Growth of spruce in the buffer and removal areas is quite similar. Height increment increased for spruce, increased dramatically in the second period, with there's some delay in spruce height increment during the first period, which we observe has been observed many times. We have to wait at least 3 years before we generally start seeing height increment of the spruce improve, and that's consistent with many studies that show after removing overstory above spruce, it has to adjust its diameter and its root system so that it can handle being in the open, growing in the open, and being a little more exposed to sunlight and wind and drought and other things. Diameter growth of spruce, however, did increase immediately after understory removal, but showed continued increase in the second measurement period up to age 10. Aspen saplings were abundant in the removal area, also fairly abundant in the extraction area, but not quite as abundant in the removal area. A bit of a surprise, which I think is due to some soil damage and soil disturbance in the extraction area. So there's some compaction happening there that's reducing aspen numbers. And anyone who's walked down the extraction trails in these blocks, there are lots of patches where there are no aspen in these blocks, in the trails, areas that have been severely impacted during harvesting, but also some aspen regeneration. Saplings even are coming up even in the buffer areas because of the increased light reaching into those buffer areas from the side. At age 10, spruce sapling densities were over 1,000 stems per hectare in the removal areas, and just under 700 stems per hectare on average in the buffer areas, and about 55 in the extraction areas. So very, very few spruce are found in the extraction areas. Yeah, though that may change over time as we see natural regeneration occurring going forward. There can also be, if there isn't a lot of aspen in those extraction areas, there's often a lot of Calamagrostis, which, as we know, and as Milo explained last week, can create serious problems for spruce regeneration. So overall, mortality rate was higher for aspen than spruce. Ingress rate for aspen was the same in the removal and extraction areas, and about 2 times higher in the removal and extraction areas than in the buffer subplots. Ingress rate for spruce saplings in the removal and extraction area seems to be decreasing over time, over the 10 years of measurement that we have. Yeah, so yield estimates projecting out 70 years. So we're looking at about 105 cubic meters of deciduous for the second pass, so a little more than my gaming simulations, and about 168 cubic meters per hectare for the conifer in the final removal. So yeah, so lots of opportunity, and fairly, we're looking at 270 cubic meters in a second pass in these stands. So a pretty nice situation. So 70 years after understory protection, we're coming up with a deciduous MAI for that post understory protection period of 1.7 cubic meters for the deciduous and 2.8 cubic meters per hectare for the conifer. So pretty respectable growth rates. Next, Ivan, please. All right, so so before we break for questions, just like to briefly acknowledge a number of people who've been involved in the SCUP trial. So it was this, as we mentioned, the trial was established by the Mixed Management Association starting in 2005, with a couple of years of pre-planning and thinking this through. Yeah, several people involved, including and particularly Gita Grover, who led development of this trial, and Willie Fast, who implemented the study and the measurement protocols and developed the revisions and updated the measurement protocols. Stacy Bergheim assisted with project management and project development. Yeah, over the first many years. Sharon Meredith has provided oversight of the project since 2014. Kirk Johnson, really grateful to Kirk for his assistance with the MGM simulations. And actually, Kirk ran the latest set of MGM simulations for us just a few days ago. So these are really fresh, hot results. And the Mixed Project team have supported this initiative, many of whom have SCUP installations that they're maintaining. And finally, need to acknowledge the contractors who've conducted the measurements over time of these installations. So with that, unless Ivan has further comments or things to say, we can turn over to questions.